In the harsh Texas borderlands of 1873, where bloodshed between settlers and Comanche warriors defined the frontier, Harriet Freeman discovered a wounded Comanche girl hiding in her barn. The formerly enslaved healer faced an impossible choice: turn the child over to hostile townspeople or shelter her from those who thought her dead. When 70 Comanche warriors surrounded her homestead at dawn, Harriet stood alone on her porch, knowing her next words would determine not just her fate, but whether two worlds would continue their cycle of vengeance or find something rarer than gold in the West: mercy. Dawn broke cold over the Texas borderlands. Harriet Freeman stood alone on her porch, shoulders squared against the amber light. 70 Comanche warriors on horseback formed a perfect half-circle around her small homestead, their faces painted for war, their weapons ready. At their center sat War Chief Running Bear, his elaborate headdress catching the first rays of sun. Behind Harriet, inside the cabin, a feverish Comanche girl fought for each breath. Running Bear raised his hand. The warriors fell silent. "Give me my daughter," he said in broken English. Harriet's hands trembled, but her voice held firm. "She'll die if you move her now." The chief dismounted. His moccasins made no sound against the hard earth. He approached the steps, towering over Harriet. The knife at his belt gleamed as he drew it. "Then we die together, medicine woman. You, me, my daughter, all of us. Today." 3 days earlier, Liberty Creek had awakened to news of Comanche raids on the Thompson homestead 10 miles north. Harriet had listened to the accounts from her small table at the back of Wilson's General Store. 2 dead, a child taken, livestock slaughtered. Marshal Davis slammed his fist on a barrel. "They've crossed the line. We form a militia at sundown." No one noticed Harriet slip away. Her cottage sat a half-mile beyond town limits, close enough to be called when needed, far enough to keep her separate. The townspeople respected her healing skills, but kept their distance. A Negro woman living alone raised questions they preferred not to consider. Harriet had learned medicine as a slave tending to her master's family, then honed it in Union field hospitals. Freedom had brought her west, where her skills mattered more than her history. Still, she remained caught between worlds, not fully accepted by the white settlers, unable to return to a South that had scattered her family like seeds in wind. She checked her supplies that afternoon: yarrow for wounds, willow bark for fever, whiskey for what herbs couldn't touch. The coming days would bring injuries, regardless of which side claimed victory. Night fell with storm clouds gathering. Harriet lit her lamp and heated water for tea when the first thunder rolled across the plains. Her mare whinnied from the barn, frantic against the coming storm. Lightning cracked. The world outside her window turned briefly white. Something moved near the barn door. A shadow, then stillness. Harriet reached for her shotgun. 10 years free, and still the fear lived in her bones. She wrapped her shawl tight and crossed the yard, rain pelting her face like tiny stones. The barn door stood ajar. She nudged it wider with her boot. A small figure lay crumpled in the straw. A child, no more than 12. Dark hair plastered across a copper face, blood soaking through a deerskin dress. The girl's eyes fluttered open. Terror filled them at the sight of Harriet. "Hush now," Harriet whispered, setting down her gun. "I won't hurt you." The wound was clean, a rifle ball through the shoulder. The militia's work, not nature's. Harriet faced her first true choice: help this child and be branded traitor, or turn her over to townsfolk who'd let her die slowly if they didn't kill her outright. She thought of another child, her own daughter, sold away at 9. The memory of small fingers slipping from her grasp settled the question. Harriet lifted the girl, so light for one carrying such weight. Inside, she cleaned the wound by lamplight. The girl whimpered but didn't fight. Harriet worked silently, the way she'd learned under her master's watchful eye. No wasted motion, no unnecessary sound. By morning, the fever had come. The girl tossed on Harriet's bed, speaking words Harriet couldn't understand. One phrase repeated clearly: "Running Bear." Harriet froze. Every settler knew that name. Running Bear. The war chief whose raids had become legend. The man whose very mention caused mothers to clutch their children closer. This was his daughter. The militia had shot a war chief's child. Noon brought the sound of horses, the militia returning. Harriet peered through her window as they rode past her property toward town. Dust-covered men with hard eyes. Blood on their clothes, that wasn't theirs. She reached town an hour later, basket of dried herbs on her arm. A reason to listen, to learn. The saloon overflowed. Men drank and laughed. Marshal Davis stood on a chair, arm raised for silence. We tracked them to their camp, hit them hard and fast. He took a long drink. Got 6 of them, including Running Bear's daughter. Cheers drowned out Harriet's sharp intake of breath. We've sent those savages a message they won't forget, the marshal continued. They touch one of ours, we take 10 of theirs. More cheers. The piano player struck up a lively tune. Harriet slipped away, her mind churning like creek water over stones. The girl the militia believed dead lay in her bed, the most valuable hostage in the territory, or the most dangerous secret. That evening the girl's fever broke. Her eyes opened, clear and wary. Harriet offered water. The girl drank cautiously. "Little fawn," she said, touching her chest, her English surprising Harriet. "Harriet," she replied, mimicking the gesture. The girl studied her with eyes too old for her years. "Why help?" Harriet touched the locket at her neck, inside a small braid of dark hair, all she had left of her own child. "Some wounds go deeper than others," she said. They shared a meal of cornbread and beans. Little Fawn watched Harriet's every move. Trust built slower than a desert flower, but it grew nonetheless. Night fell again. Harriet checked the girl's wound, the skin around it still angry, but no sign of putrefaction. Little Fawn pointed to the window. "They come," she said simply. "Who?" "My father, his warriors. They watch." Harriet felt ice water in her veins. "How long?" "Since morning." That night, Harriet barely slept. She imagined shadows moving beyond her windows, eyes watching from the darkness. By morning, she thought it merely fear playing tricks. Then she opened her door at first light. 70 warriors circled her home. Their chief approached with a knife in hand, and Harriet Freeman stood her ground as the sun crested the eastern plains, knowing the next words spoken would either seal her death or open a door neither she nor Running Bear had believed possible. The next morning, Harriet changed Little Fawn's bandages with practiced hands. The girl watched her movements, eyes tracking each careful fold and application of healing salve. Outside, birds scattered from invisible threats. The Comanche presence remained hidden, but felt like storm clouds gathering beyond the horizon. Little Fawn pointed to a worn wooden box on Harriet's shelf, curiosity in the gesture. Harriet hesitated before retrieving it. Some treasures weren't meant for sharing. She opened the lid and removed her locket, the brass tarnished by years and salt tears. Inside lay a small braid of dark hair tied with faded ribbon. "My daughter," Harriet said. Little Fawn's fingers hovered over the braid but didn't touch. Respect for grief recognized across the chasm between their worlds. "Where?" Harriet closed the locket. "Sold. South. 10 years now." Words inadequate for the wound, like trying to catch river water in cupped hands. Little Fawn nodded as if the answer confirmed something she'd already known. She reached for a stick of charcoal from the hearth and began drawing on a scrap of brown paper. Figures took shape. Men on horseback, others standing with raised hands. A white flag. "Peace talk," Little Fawn said. "Father tired of death." Her finger traced to the next image, rifles firing, bodies falling. No warning. Harriet studied the drawings. The militia's victory revealed as ambush. A peace delegation slaughtered. The story Liberty Creek wouldn't want told. Little Fawn's eyes drifted to the window. More will die now. That afternoon, dust rose on the road from town. A single rider approached. Marshal Davis, his badge catching sunlight like a wink from a lyre. Harriet met him at the gate, posture casual but blocking his view inside. "Need supplies for the wounded, Harriet. Bandages, that willow bark tea of yours." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Wait here." Inside, she hurried little Fawn to the root cellar, pressing a finger to her lips. The girl moved without sound, practiced in silence and hiding. A child should never know such skills so well. Harriet gathered supplies, mind racing like a hunted fox. The marshal rarely collected medicines himself. His presence meant questions, suspicions. Outside, she found him on her porch, examining her doorframe. "Strange tracks by your barn," he said, accepting the package. "Small, like a child's." "Raccoons, most likely." His gaze lingered on her face. "Johnson swears he wounded the war chief's daughter before they retreated. Body wasn't found." Wind stirred the oak leaves above them, nature filling silence where words would only endanger. "Folks talking about Comanche scouts circling the valley," he continued. "Seen anything unusual?" "Just my herbs and patience, Marshal." He nodded, not believing. "Lock your door tonight, Harriet. They don't distinguish between friends and enemies when blood's been spilled." After he left, Harriet leaned against her door, her heartbeat a war drum in her chest, the small lie now a chasm opening beneath her feet, no way across but forward. That evening, little Fawn's fever returned with vengeance, infection claiming territory in her small body. She thrashed against Harriet's hold, words spilling in both Comanche and broken English, stories of her father's vision quest, his desire for peace after seeing too many small bodies wrapped in deerskin, the careful selection of warriors who sought coexistence rather than more graves. "No more death," she whispered, eyes focused on shadows only she could see. Father's words. No more small graves. Harriet fought the infection with every remedy she possessed. Poultices, teas, cold cloths, prayers to a God who had once seemed distant, but now felt present in each labored breath. Morning light found them both exhausted. Little Fawn slept fitfully. Outside, Liberty Creek awakened to another day of mounting tension. Harriet watched from her window as riders patrolled the outskirts, rifles across their saddles. Men preparing for war while claiming peace was impossible. A knock at her door startled her from dark thoughts. She opened it to find Elijah, the marshal's young deputy, his face troubled waters. "Marshal sent me to check if you needed anything," he said, eyes darting past her shoulder. "Nothing needed. Thank you." He didn't move. "He thinks you're hiding something, Harriet, or someone." Their eyes met. Understanding passed between them like current in still water. "Be careful," he whispered, then louder. "I'll tell him you're well." As afternoon shadows lengthened, little Fawn grew stronger. She sat up in bed, accepting broth from Harriet's hand. They communicated through gestures, drawings, and the few shared words between their languages. A bridge built of necessity and growing trust. Little Fawn sketched her people's camp, the sacred mountain beyond, her father's lodge at the center, pride in every line. Harriet showed her simple medicine techniques, which herbs healed wounds, which brought down fever. Little Fawn's quick mind absorbed the knowledge like parched earth welcoming rain. Night fell too quickly. With darkness came the echo of horses approaching. Not one rider this time. Many. Harriet peered through curtains to see Marshal Davis leading 6 armed men, their expressions grim determination in lantern light. "Harriet Freeman," the marshal called. "Come out, we need to talk." She stepped onto her porch, closing the door firmly behind her. Her shotgun remained inside, propped against the wall. A deliberate choice. Violence answered with violence created only wider circles of pain. "It's late for social calls, Marshal." "This isn't social." He dismounted. "We found Comanche tracks all around your property, and blood on the straw in your barn." The other men spread out surrounding her small home, trapping her. "Johnson here says he wounded the chief's daughter 3 days ago. Gut shot. She couldn't have gotten far." Harriet's expression revealed nothing. Her years as property had taught her to wear stillness like armor. "You're harboring an enemy, Harriet. That makes you a traitor." "I harbor only the sick and injured, as I've always done." "Then you won't mind if we search your home?" She straightened her spine. "I would mind very much." The marshal's face hardened. His hand moved to his pistol. "Don't make this difficult." The door opened behind her. Little Fawn stood in the threshold, small but unbent. Her dark eyes met the marshal's without flinching. "She saved me," the girl said in clear English. "You kill her, my father kills everyone." Silence fell heavy as winter snow. The marshal's men exchanged uneasy glances, the gravity of their situation sinking in like cold water through thin cloth. "The chief's daughter," Marshal Davis whispered. "Alive." His expression shifted from shock to calculation. A hostage, leverage, a way to force concessions from the Comanche. "Step aside, Harriet." She didn't move, her body a boundary between Little Fawn and harm. Behind her, she felt the girl's hand touch her skirt, trust given completely. Harriet's hand moved to her pocket. The cold metal of her father's old revolver pressed against her palm. A weapon she'd hoped never to use. "Leave my property, Marshal," her voice calm as still water. "Now." He studied her face, measuring resolve against risk, finding steel where he'd expected to find straw. "We'll be back in the morning, with more men." He mounted his horse. "Think about where your loyalties lie, Harriet Freeman." After they departed, Harriet locked her door with trembling hands. The night ahead stretched endless. By morning, she would face the militia's judgment. No place remained for her in Liberty Creek. No safety for Little Fawn. She began packing essentials, medicines, food, blankets. The weight of her decision settling on her shoulders like a yoke. "They come back," Little Fawn said, watching her preparations. "Kill you. Take me. We'll be gone before dawn." Little Fawn shook her head, pointed to the window, to the night beyond where unseen eyes watched. "My father comes first." Night descended like a shroud over the cabin. Harriet finished her preparations by lamplight, hands steady despite the storm in her chest. A small canvas bag held medicines, dried meat, cornbread. Enough for 2 days' journey. Beyond that, only faith would sustain them. Little Fawn watched from the bed, eyes reflecting lamplight. Her wound had closed but still painted her movements with pain. She pointed toward the east window, a gesture both warning and promise. "My father knows I live," she said. "He watches." Harriet extinguished the lamp. Darkness revealed what light concealed. Shadows moved beyond her fence line, the faint outline of a feathered headdress, bodies melting into night like water into sand. "How long have they been there?" "2 days. Testing you." Testing. The word hung between them. Harriet understood its weight. Not simply watching, but judging her character. Her treatment of Little Fawn a trial she hadn't known she faced. She wrote a letter by fading firelight. Words that would mark her a traitor in Liberty Creek, but might save lives when morning came. An explanation, a warning, a plea for understanding that would likely go unheeded. The night stretched endless. Harriet took turns at the window, watching the darkness breathe with movement. Little Fawn finally succumbed to exhaustion, her small chest rising and falling beneath the quilt. One child safe, for this moment at least. Harriet's thoughts drifted to another child, her own daughter, face fading in memory like writing on sand. Dawn approached with cold fingers of light. Harriet dozed in her chair, startled awake by Little Fawn's hand on her arm, the girl's face tight with urgency. "They come." Harriet moved to the window, her breath caught. Comanche warriors materialized from the morning mist. Not 5 or 10, but dozens. Surrounding her small homestead in a perfect half circle, their painted faces and feathered lances stark against the pale sky. At their center, a figure taller than the rest, a headdress of eagle feathers trailing down his back. Running Bear. The war chief whose name mothers used to frighten disobedient children. The father whose wounded daughter slept under Harriet's roof. "What now?" Harriet whispered. Little Fawn stood straighter. "You meet him. Alone. And if he kills me?" The girl's eyes held ancient wisdom. "Then you die with honor." Harriet pinned up her hair, straightened her apron. Small gestures of dignity before facing judgment. She touched the locket at her throat, thinking of another child lost to her, of chances never given. "Stay inside," she told Little Fawn. "Whatever happens." The porch boards creaked beneath her feet. Morning air bit at her skin as she closed the door behind her. 70 pairs of eyes tracked her movement. 70 warriors waited for their chief's command. Running Bear approached on foot, his steps measured, deliberate. War paint streaked his face like dried blood. Weapons hung from his belt, a knife, a tomahawk, a settler's scalp. Harriet planted her feet, hands at her sides, unmoving as the oak tree behind her cabin. They faced each other across 5 feet of dust, a gap small in distance, immeasurable in understanding. "My daughter," he said in broken English. "She lives," Harriet answered. "She heals." His eyes measured her, looking for weakness, for deception, finding neither. Why help? The question containing all questions. Why would a woman alone risk everything for the child of her enemy? What payment did she expect? What trap was this? Because she needed help, Harriet said. Simple truth like clean water. Running Bear drew his knife, sunlight catching the blade. Harriet didn't flinch, didn't close her eyes. If death came, she would meet it standing. Instead, he cut his own palm. Blood welled black in the morning light. He extended his hand, an offering and a test. "Blood oath," he said. "You save my child. I save your life." Before Harriet could respond, hoofbeats thundered from the direction of Liberty Creek. The marshal and his militia approached fast, at least 20 men, rifles ready. The sound scattered birds from nearby trees. Running Bear's warriors tensed, bows raised, lances leveled. The air between the two groups crackled with coming violence. Marshal Davis reined his horse to a stop. His eyes widened at the sight before him. One woman standing between 70 Comanche warriors and 20 armed settlers, a fulcrum upon which the future balanced. "Step away from her, Chief," the marshal called. "She's under our protection." Running Bear's face revealed nothing. "She protects my daughter. She stands under my protection now." Understanding dawned on the marshal's face. Followed quickly by calculation, he raised his rifle. "That girl is our hostage now, our leverage against future raids." "No," Harriet's voice carried across the tense silence. "She's not a hostage. She's a child, who came here with her father on a peace mission before your men attacked them." Murmurs spread through the militia, uncertain glances exchanged. "That's a lie," the marshal spat. "They raided the Thompson place, killed 2 men. She lies." Running Bear pointed east. "Thompson men crossed boundary stones, stole our horses. We took back what was ours." The door behind Harriet opened. Little Fawn emerged, smaller in the morning light than she had any right to be. A child carrying the weight of 2 people's future. She stood beside Harriet, her hand finding the woman's much like a daughter might reach for her mother. "No more killing," Little Fawn said, her voice clear despite weakness. "Father came for peace talks, carried white flag. They shot anyway." The marshal's face darkened. "No one's going to believe the word of a savage girl." A horse pushed forward from the militia's ranks. Deputy Elijah, his young face troubled waters beneath still surface. "It's true, Marshal. I was there." His voice carried to both sides. "They came under white flag. You ordered us to fire anyway." Silence fell like an axe. Men shifted in their saddles, the truth settling uncomfortable upon shoulders accustomed to its absence. The marshal's rifle swung toward Elijah. "Shut your mouth, boy!" "You wanted war," Elijah continued, "said it was the only way to claim their hunting grounds. That peace would leave settlers with the rocky soil while they kept the fertile valley." Running Bear raised his hand. His warriors grew still, watching, waiting. "Peace," he said, the word awkward on his tongue. "My daughter says this woman has good heart. Heal her hands, maybe bridge between our peoples." The sun climbed higher, burning away morning mist, revealing each face clearly to the other. Men who had been enemies for generations, seeing each other fully perhaps for the first time. Marshal Davis spat on the ground. "There's no peace with savages, only temporary truces until we're strong enough to wipe them out." He raised his rifle again, aimed at Running Bear's chest. Little Fawn stepped forward, placing her small body between her father and the threat, the movement opening her wound, blood spreading across her deerskin dress. "Kill him," she said in clear English. "All die." Harriet moved beside her. Two females standing against the tide of male violence. One black, one Comanche, both refusing the narrative written for them by others' hands. "Put down your weapon, Marshal," Harriet said. "There's been enough blood spilled." The moment stretched taut as a bowstring. Every breath measured. Every movement weighted with consequence. The future hanging suspended between heartbeats. Then Running Bear did what no one expected. He laid his weapons on the ground. Knife, tomahawk, war club, each placed deliberately at his feet. His warriors stared in disbelief, their chief standing unarmed before their enemies. "No more small graves," he said. "No more mothers crying." The marshal's finger tightened on the trigger, his face twisted with thwarted rage. A single shot cracked across the yard. The marshal's horse reared as its rider slumped sideways, not dead but wounded, his arm blooming red where Elijah's bullet had struck. The deputy's smoking gun pointed skyward now, its message delivered. "No more," Elijah said, his young face set like cooling iron. "This ends." Warriors tensed for battle. Settlers raised their weapons. The world balanced on a knife edge between bloodshed and something new. Little Fawn swayed on her feet, the reopened wound taking its toll. Harriet caught her before she fell, the girl's blood warm against her hands, a familiar weight in her arms, like holding another child from another time. "She needs care," Harriet called to both sides. "Now!" Running Bear crossed the distance between them. His shadow fell across his daughter's face. His hand, still bleeding from the unfinished blood oath, hovered over her brow. "My lodge," he said. "Our medicine." "Your medicine won't close this wound," Harriet answered, and moving her wrists more bleeding. Their eyes met over the child's body. Understanding passed between them. Some barriers deeper than language, older than the conflicts of their peoples. Little Fawn stirred. Her eyes found her father's face. Words passed between them in Comanche, soft as prairie wind. The war chief's expression changed, something ancient softening in the hard lines of his face. He turned to his warriors, spoke quickly, hands gesturing toward Harriet's cabin, toward the militia. The warriors lowered their weapons, not fully, but enough. "My daughter says this woman's lodge is sacred ground," Running Bear translated, his English emerging more fluent in urgency. "No blood spilled here. She says Healer Woman can save both peoples if we listen." The militiamen shifted uneasily, their leader wounded, their certainties crumbling under the weight of unwelcome truth. "The marshal lied," Deputy Elijah pressed, "about the peace delegation, about the raids, all to push the Comanche off their hunting grounds." Murmurs spread through the settlers, men exchanging glances, recognizing deception's bitter taste. Little Fawn spoke again, her voice threading through the tension like a needle through rough cloth. "Father came for peace, still wants peace." Her English clear despite pain blurring her eyes. "Too many dead, too many orphans." Harriet felt the child's forehead, fever returning, quick as summer lightning. No time remained for politics or posturing. "Help me get her inside," she told Running Bear. Together they carried Little Fawn into the cabin, enemy and protector united in common purpose. Behind them, deputies disarmed the marshal. Warriors dismounted but kept vigilant watch, an uneasy truce born of necessity rather than trust. Inside, Harriet worked swiftly. Fresh bandages, healing poultice, her hands moving with practiced precision, while Running Bear watched, standing sentinel at his daughter's bedside. "Why help us?" he asked finally, the question that had hung between them from the beginning. Harriet paused, needle poised above the wound. "I know what it means to be seen as less than human, to have a child taken." She resumed her stitching, each puncture of the needle a small violence necessary for healing, much like the truth. "Your people enslaved mine," she continued. "Her people killed yours. The chains are different, but they bind us all." Running Bear's face remained impassive, but his eyes tracked her movements, measuring not just her skill, but her spirit. "You have lost a child," he said. Not a question. "My daughter, sold south before freedom came. I search still, but the trail grows cold." Little Fawn's eyes fluttered open at these words. Her small hand reached for Harriet's wrist, stopping the needle's progress. "Medicine woman saves me," she told her father in English. "Makes bridge between worlds." Running Bear considered this, then drew his knife again. Harriet tensed, but he only reopened his own palm where the blood had begun to congeal. "Blood oath," he said, extending his hand. "My people, your people. No more war." Harriet set down her needle, looked at the offered hand, the enormity of the moment settling like winter snow around them. "I speak only for myself," she said, "not for others who look like me." "I speak for my tribe," Running Bear answered. "As war chief, my word binds all." Outside, voices rose and fell like tide against shoreline, the future taking shape in words exchanged between former enemies. Harriet heard Elijah's voice, firm declarations, challenges answered, leadership assumed in the wake of betrayal exposed. She took Running Bear's hand. Their blood mingled. Not the first time black and native blood had joined, but perhaps the first time by choice rather than violence. "No more war," she agreed. Little Fawn smiled weakly, fever still burning in her cheeks, something like hope lighting her eyes from within. The seasons turned. Spring softened into summer. Summer baked into fall. The agreement struck that day on Harriet's porch grew roots, fragile as prairie grass but surprisingly resilient. Her cabin became neutral ground, a place where Comanche came for healing alongside settlers, where words were exchanged alongside remedies, understanding cultivated like her herb garden, requiring patience and consistent tending. Little Fawn recovered fully. She chose to stay, apprenticing in Harriet's healing arts while serving as translator when needed, her quick mind absorbing knowledge from both worlds, a bridge formed of young flesh and old wisdom. The marshal stood trial in Austin, his crimes named plainly by those who had followed him blindly before. Deputy Elijah became the new lawman, young but steady as the North Star, justice tempered with understanding, strength measured in peace maintained rather than battles won. Running Bear kept his word. No raids, no stolen horses or scalped settlers. The boundary stones respected by both sides. Not perfect harmony, but breathable space where two peoples could coexist. His prestige among neighboring tribes grew, the war chief who found power in peace rather than conflict. And Harriet continued her work, hands that had known chains, now free to heal, to build, to create something new from the broken pieces of old hatreds. 1 year after Little Fawn had collapsed in her barn, Harriet looked up from her garden to see dust rising on the eastern trail. Running Bear approached, but not alone. Behind him rode warriors escorting a wagon. Inside sat a woman. Little Fawn emerged from the cabin, now taller, her English nearly perfect. Her face split into rare, full smile at the sight of her father. Running Bear dismounted. His face showed the passing seasons but carried less weight. The burden of constant war lifted from his shoulders. "Medicine woman," he greeted Harriet. "I bring payment for blood oath." He gestured toward the wagon. The woman inside stood slowly, uncertain, her clothes threadbare but clean, her face lined beyond her years, her eyes, Harriet's eyes. "Mama?" The word barely a whisper. Harriet's basket fell. Herbs scattered like memories across the ground. Her feet carried her forward without conscious command. Across the yard, past Running Bear, to the wagon where impossibility had taken human form. Rebecca? Her daughter stood fully now. A woman grown where Harriet had last seen a child, but the eyes unchanged, the small scar above her left eyebrow still visible, proof against disbelief. "My scouts found her in Louisiana," Running Bear explained, "working cotton fields. I traded 6 horses for her freedom." Words failed, gratitude too small for the moment. Harriet reached for her daughter with trembling hands, found solid flesh where dreams had always dissolved before. They embraced as Little Fawn joined them. 3 females from different worlds, connected by loss, by survival, by the strange mercy found in unexpected places. Running Bear watched from horseback, satisfaction in the straight line of his shoulders, a debt repaid, honor satisfied. A shot cracked the autumn air. The recently released marshal fell from the ridge above the cabin, his final act of hatred fulfilled. The rifle he'd aimed at Running Bear's back still clutched in dead hands. Near him stood Elijah, his own weapon smoking. Justice delivered too late to prevent one final bullet. Horses scattered. Warriors reached for weapons. Settlers emerging from nearby homes grabbed rifles. The peace built over careful months, suddenly fragile as spider silk in wind. Running Bear looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, at Harriet holding both girls protectively, at his warriors preparing for battle, at the settlers with fingers on triggers. One gesture would ignite the valley in bloodshed. Instead, he raised his hand palm outward, the same gesture of peace he had offered 1 year before. Slowly, warriors lowered bows, settlers lowered rifles, the moment of violence passing like storm clouds without rain. "Some stories," Harriet whispered to the girls pressed against her sides, "have no end."